we are joined today by Nooshin Akrami, who is a freelance sustainability consultant and used to work at the University of Bolton, from what I understand, for the last 13 years before you went freelance. And you've also completed your undergraduate degree with us at Bolton in architectural technology. That sounds amazing. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that we recently connected on LinkedIn. I was really interested by your profile. And I feel for what I'm doing with these podcasts for educational journeys that you have such an interesting story, and you may well be able to relate to some of our local students.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining me today. Now, I know that you didn't grow up in this country. So are you okay talking about your initial education?
Yeah, of course I am. You mean prior to university?
From growing up, from being a youngster, education.
From growing up, right? Okay. I lived in Iran the first 25 years of my life, and I didn't manage to go to university. The university system in Iran is quite different, but I studied. In Iran, we had the system in education was in a way that you studied the primary and then something in the middle, so 5 years of primary, 3 years of middle school, and then 4 years of high school. And in our education, so you study 12 years. It's not like English system that you do until 16-year-old general education, and then after that 2 years of A levels to be specialized. We do actually do that 12 years, and by the time that we are 18 we are ready to go to university with the qualification from high school.
That's all done within high school?
Yeah, it's all within high school. And you actually, I mean, the system may have changed in Iran. I've left Iran 25 years ago practically, but that was it. So you could choose in a subject area as to what you want to do for your education, for your A-level topics that you want to choose. You actually choose them during the high school. And I studied maths and physics because I wanted to study engineering. And at the time when I first chose that, I was thinking of doing electronic engineering. That was what I wanted to do. But then bear in mind that I am, I was 7 when the revolution happened. And then the fields of studies for women were a little bit narrowed in particular way. So say, for example, within my choices of going to university, I chosen to become a mining engineer. But apparently I could not actually choose that because it wasn't a course for women, because you are in such confined, you could potentially be in so many such confined areas with men. So it wasn't a course for women. So based on that I wanted to do, and I always liked maths. I become much better at it after high school. But so I did that. And then I tried going to university the first year, towards the end of my high school. And during the time that Iran was in a very difficult stage of the war, we had missiles flying all over Tehran and all of that. And some other interesting dynamics of my own family as well, which I will talk about it later probably. I went to a course with a couple of my friends to learn how to draft and create architectural perspectives and drafting. And all of a sudden there was this urge in me that's so amazing, especially because I never thought that I'm actually good at drawing, and I ended up creating such really amazing images. And so all of a sudden I had this urge to do architecture. So, but I didn't get enough points to go to university at the time. And at the time, we didn't have many, non-state universities at the time. They started shortly after that, or just about that time, but they were quite expensive, and I wasn't from a wealthy family to be able to pay for my education. So I had to, if I wanted to go to university, I had to find a state university or find a place in a state university. So I didn't get to architecture the first year, and then I think I had enough point to do modern languages. Sometimes I regret why I didn't do it, because apparently I'm actually quite good in languages. I kind of recognized that a little later in life. And then I tried again the next year, I think, and I had enough mark to do historic building restoration degree, and I still didn't go to university. I didn't want to do that degree. And then my life changed in a way, the dynamics of my personal life changed in a way that I just gave up. But when I didn't get to university the first year, I started looking for a job. And I remember somewhere not far from where I lived, a company was asking for draftsperson. So I kind of moved to doing by learning by doing kind of thing. So I started and went there. But I'll let you ask a question about my education, of work, whatever, after this question.
Yeah, it's really interesting listening to you. So did everything change after the revolution then? Was education looked at very differently?
I don't think that, well, a lot of everything changed after revolution. Everything changed after revolution. But if you ask me to tell you a lot about what it was before revolution with my personal experience, I was a child. I really didn't know much really, or didn't experience much. Life was tough for me before it. Life was tough for me after it, probably tougher. But
was it harder being a woman in education in Iran?
No, I mean, no, not necessarily. It's not. I mean, Iran is much better. I mean, I always say that I could have been even worse off. I'm born in Afghanistan, but Iran was a little bit better in that sense. So schools are separate. You know, girls are going to girls' school, boys are going to boys' school. And the advantage I had in my life is that I grew up with my father. My parents divorced when I was 14 months.
Right.
And I grew up with my father, my sister and I. My sister was a newborn when they divorced. And my father's motto was to make sure that we get a good education. We study. We do as much as we can. We study as much as possible to make sure that we are independent. And these are some of the interesting lessons that I learned from my dad. He used to say, when we were really young, he used to say, learn a skill that gives you that freedom to earn a living for yourself, so you don't have to live with a man and unhappily live with a man just because they are providing for you. So that's one of the most important lessons in life that I've had from my dad. So everything actually worked from there afterward, to be truthful. And it was difficult in Iran. it is difficult to be a woman in Iran. I'm not sure how difficult. Like I said, I've left Iran 25 years ago, went back very briefly for a couple of months before I migrated to the UK. And I found it really, really difficult. And it's much more complicated than saying it is difficult because of the government. It's difficult. There's so many layers to that. There are so many social levels. Is that I mean, this kind of thing that I remember from my mom's mom, my grandma, saying, maybe a woman wants to do many things. Should her husband be so ignorant to let her to do that? You know, and it's that the women themselves didn't see that right for themselves, to be somebody, to do something, to think, to and these kind of things conflicted with the way I was brought up and the way I thought so deeply. It's just it doesn't work. It doesn't fit in one sentence. It really needs a really, really deep discussion to actually go through that. I found it hard to be a woman, not just in education, in general, in life. Is really, really, it was really tough to be a woman. You have, you know, you belong to your father. I mean, under the Islamic regime, you belong to your father until you are married, and then once you are married, you belong to a husband. So your husband can make a decision whether or not you go to education, whether or not you work, or whether or not you travel. You know, it's that's how it is, or that's definitely how it was. I don't know how much it changed now.
It's alien for me to think about, because I mean, I know we talk a lot about equal rights when it comes to women and men, but I think we are polar ahead when it comes to thinking about how that experience must have been in Iran. I know it's just fundamentally different, isn't it?
It's different, I think, and I think we had a little discussion before then. These things have roots in much deeper areas. The freedom that women have in the United Kingdom, the equal rights that they enjoy, or whatever equal right that they enjoy, is part of a social system that is supporting that equality. There is not a social system. There is not a system to support a single woman with children. There isn't. There is not a system to support a social system to support a woman who has 2 little kids to sit at home and actually bring them up. There isn't. Mm-hmm. And if the man who is the father of these children doesn't want to support that woman, then what should she do? How should she actually? There is not a social housing system. There's nothing. There is nothing. If that woman doesn't have the means through her family or herself or somebody else, she is practically incapable of looking after herself, never mind the kids, you know. And based on that, because a government doesn't want to provide these services, there is not a structure, a social system, a structure to actually create provision for this network of support that hold the society together. Because that political system is not in place, then what they do is that they give the right to the man, because what man can do, can go and marry tomorrow, take the children and give them to this new wife to look after them, and go out to work and pay for the living. So there is not a social system within the society to actually create that provision. You know, at best happens in there, that you end up in the street and somebody picks you and takes you to children's home and you grow up in children's home. That's what happens.
And that's the best.
And that's if you're lucky.
Yeah. Wow.
And
It's a different world, isn't it? It really is. I don't think we know enough about Iran, to be honest. I think we're just taught bad things. I mean, we can talk about social constructs in the media, but we don't really know what it's like for people living there.
Do you know, Lyndsey, it's interesting. I don't think people know a lot about where they live to start with. I mean, I don't think that people think about what actually goes on behind the freedom they have, what actually goes on, what kind of social structure, what kind of politics going on behind the fact that somebody can enjoy having a kid and then the ability to have access to free health system, to free education, to housing, to a lot of different things. As a single mom, say, for example, to bring up their children, I don't think people pay attention to where they are, never mind where they aren't.
No. I think you're absolutely right. I think I certainly never realised how lucky I was just because I was born here, and just because I had a passport with the words British or United Kingdom on it. You don't realise what that brings to you. And kind of reflecting back on my upbringing, no, we don't talk about it. We don't.
It's just a given, isn't it? It's there. It's there. You're born with this 10 finger. You never pay attention to how important they are until one of them is going missing.
Yeah. Or you meet somebody who has 9 fingers.
Yeah.
Oh, how must life be for them? And that's it. We just walk along in our little bubbles, don't we? And we just kind of deal with our own lives. And so something happens that makes us question that.
Yeah.
I think that those questions are really important. We've had some recent events, haven't we, that has made everybody start to question everything across the board. We've had stuff happen in America when it comes to Black Lives Matter, and then you think about what happened in Kent with Sarah Everard dying, and it started to raise all these questions. And I think slowly we are asking the right questions. Whether we're listening to the answers or not, I don't know, but we're asking. People like me are asking questions anyway. I'm really interested to find out about different people and where they come from, and how their lives have been, because I want to learn, and I want to make those things better. I want to know how I can fit into that for somebody else. But I don't think everybody is the same. I think I know I'm surrounded by people who just want to carry on living in that bubble and living in that box, and not thinking outside of it and not accepting there's other issues. It makes me feel really sad when we're just talking about basic education, whereas I had so many opportunities, and you just didn't.
I didn't. I mean, when we were talking about, say, access to education, say, for example, I remember when I was doing that middle school, we lived for a while with my grandmother. My grandmother lived somewhere in the outskirts of Tehran. And for whatever reason, our schools were somewhere in much more central part of Tehran. Tehran is really massive anyway. And my sister and I had to leave home about 6 in the morning to be able to, or 5:30 in the morning to get to school. We had to walk. And there were times that we were up to our knees in the snow walking, because there wasn't a car in that area, so we had to walk down. And I'm talking about the time that we were 12, 13. That was the age that we were to kind of get ourselves to somewhere that is a little bit more civilization. And do you know, if you tell me to do that walk today, I would be terrified to do it. I'm literally terrified to do it. I lived somewhere. I built my first house when I was 23. I actually designed and built it when I was 23. but it was in a town in a village at the edge of a town, about 50 kilometers from Tehran. So, and I lived there and I worked in Tehran. And someday I had to walk through woods to get myself down to somewhere that I can get a taxi or something, some sort of commuting, vehicle or whatever to get myself to where I worked in Tehran. And just I think about it. I am actually terrified doing that. I don't know, how did I do those things? Do you know, walking in the woods about 6 a.m. I'm just thinking, no, thank you. I don't want to do that ever again. But that's the kind of thing we did to commute to a school, to commute to work. It's just, yeah, it's a different kind of planet to what I live today.
Yeah, I guess as well, there's like you said before, where you don't necessarily question that you've got your 10 fingers.
You just do it.
Growing up, you perhaps didn't question it. It's just what you did.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we did it because I had to do it, because I had no other choice and I had to do it. And that was my kind of way to freedom somehow. Maybe freedom, a freedom that I didn't know. In truth, and I say this over and over, if somebody asked me or told me that I will be sitting here today, here where I sit and have this conversation with you, when I was 7, I could not even imagine it. I could not imagine that. When I was 15, I could not imagine that. When I was 25, I could not imagine that. I could not imagine any of the things that I experience today, that one day I will be a British citizen. I have had the kind of education that I really wanted to have. I've become an academic and I've taught other people, and it just is like, it's a journey in dreams. Mine is it totally is.
How have you ended up in England then? How do we get to that?
It's an interesting question. I knew 2 people in England. One was a very far family member, and the other one was a teacher of my primary school, who supported my sister and I a lot when we were young. And the other thing was, I knew a little bit English, so I knew I could. When I say a little bit, I never used an interpreter unless that they had to provide it for legal reasons in the court or something like that. But I could actually manage with my English to do. I actually was really, like I told you before, I didn't recognize that skill. I was actually good in languages. In Persian, we learn at the school, we learn Arabic and English, like, in here you learn French and German or whatever. So we study English and Arabic, and I always did really well in both of those languages. I can't speak Arabic. I can read it, but I can't speak Arabic. I wish that I can actually speak it. It's a brilliant language. So I thought that, and it was an accident, it was somebody told me that they can help us with getting a visa and coming to England. And it wasn't as straightforward to get a visa, but I managed to eventually, after a lot of work, to get visa for my son and myself. I said, if I can't get a visa for my son, I won't go. So I managed to get, but that's a story for completely another day. It really isn't a story for today. So I managed to get a visa to come here, but I didn't have really any idea how am I going to actually stay here, because your visa doesn't grant a staying in here. So it was a quite a big journey to initially think what actually how can I ask for asylum in here, how can I stay here. So I was staying with that friend, that family, that far member of family for first 3 months of my staying in here before I applied for asylum.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was that process like?
It's very difficult. It really is difficult, and it can be difficult. I mean, it is different for different people. Obviously, it's just because it's interesting. I mean, the basic basic statistics of how it works is, or how it worked at the time that I was seeking asylum, was you have 1 to 2% of chance to be accepted in your first stage by Home Office.
Is it that low? I didn't realise.
That's it, 1 to 2%. That's it. And then you get rejected, and the Home Office needs to make that decision within about 6 months. And if you have not been accepted within 6 months, then you receive a refusal letter. And then you have the chance to appeal through the court. But they provide you with some sort of legal support, and you can get it. It's you don't pay for it. The system will pay for it. I know I was supported by Refugee Action and all of that, groups that were there. And I had a really good solicitor. I must say that I was so lucky that I kind of came across that solicitor. The interesting thing is, there are a lot of people who take advantage of people, and they tell them, we will represent you, and they charge people, asylum seekers. They actually charge people. I'm so glad that I didn't fall in that trap, because I was approached by very people that I stayed with to pay somebody to represent, and they went nowhere. They had no capability to do any of the job that my solicitor did for me. And so yes, if you didn't get that chance, then you will be referred. You appeal, they send you to the court, and then your chance is about 50% in the course to get a visa, permission to stay in the country. Yeah, leave to remain. And that took another 2.5 years. So potentially from when I start and when I finished being accepted as an asylum seeker, it was just over 3 years that I did. And I had to go to the court a few times. It wasn't one hearing. So yeah, it's an interesting process, but I told you it's different for different people. The interesting thing about my case is I actually had to because I came with a visa, so there was a record of my son and I entering the country. So if my husband made his way, which he did eventually, to England and searched for us, he could find us.
Wow.
So to stop him from finding us, I changed my name, my son's name, our birthdays, my parents' name. For 3 years, none of my family members who lived in Iran knew where I lived. Everybody thought that I live in Glasgow. I've never been to Glasgow. I called them. They couldn't call me. So I almost kept a full secret of where we are, where we live, what we do. So nobody knew apart from me what we are doing and where we are in my family. So it's actually quite interesting. When I came to university first in 2004 as a student, I came under a different name. And then in 2006, when in 2005, I changed, just before I applied to become British citizen, I changed my name back to my birth name, Nooshin Akrami. And that created a massive issue in the admin thing. And everybody was saying, who is this Nooshin Akrami? Who is this? So people used to call me by a different name.
So you used a different name originally to come to university. That must have been, well, it's really sad you had to do that. I understand why, I guess, for safety reasons.
It was difficult. It was psychologically. Do you know something? I actually had to speak to somebody about this because it was killing me. The fact that I was lying about my name.
Yeah.
To the UK authorities, even I was lying about my name. It was killing me. It was I was feeling so not just embarrassed, but so coward and uncomfortable with that I needed. So I went to my doctor. I said, I need a counselor. I need to speak to somebody. Yeah. And I said to the counselor, one of the first things that I said to her, I said, this is not my name.
Was that met with suspicion? How was that actually? I can
no, it didn't. It wasn't. I mean, nobody within the authorities actually questioned. Nobody questioned my name. Nobody questioned it. I could come out and say I am tomato, whatever, nobody questioned it. I created a completely different. I had the same family, but everybody had a different name. And imagine how long it took me to actually remember what everybody's name is. Just choosing a name for myself and choosing a name for my son. And all of that, it just it was such a complicated process that you're kind of walking on eggshells to make sure that you're not making a mistake with that thing while you have the other issue is at the beginning I almost couldn't tell. I mean, I actually didn't tell the actual reason why I was here. I was told that I have to create another reason, and I was advised to create another reason, which I did at the time based on the advice that I get and which I was refused on. But eventually, I actually had the remain to stay on the basis that I will lose my right over looking after my son if I go. And it was the court that actually helped me to get what I wanted based on what I actually came here for, But it is an incredibly stressful process. Besides the fact, I mean, it's not that's only one side of it. The other side of it is why you are actually here. So I had nightmares for years, and I find myself that I'm back in Iran and with my son. And I'm thinking, how am I going to escape now? How am I going to leave here? How am I going to escape? And that's the only question I have in my dream. How am I going to escape this time? So so part of it is dealing with the process of asylum, and part of it is to kind of stay sane and keep on top of your emotions, and at the same time look after your child too, try and not to I don't think that I necessarily was the most successful person in terms of not transferring all of that pressure to my son.
I don't think there's anybody who can go through any life-changing
it's
event
impossible, is it?
Without. But I also believe children need to see emotions. I don't come from the generation where we need to hide everything from our children. We need to show them sadness. We need to show them happiness so then they can deal with it themselves. Because if you keep them, again, in this bubble where everything's just normal, how do they learn how to deal with things themselves?
Exactly. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
I feel really sad that you've ever felt the need to have to seek asylum. But what I also feel is happiness that we do live in a place where that can happen. And I accept it might be incredibly difficult to get to this end result. But I am really proud that we're able to offer that to people, because I do believe that people should not live in fear. And you should live in a place where you can excel and just be. You shouldn't have to be looking over your shoulder and worrying about something as important as that. And I just
it's quite interesting. Years later, my husband followed us, came here, and at some point he started threatening me to say that I'm going to get him off you and I'm going to do this. And there's a Turkish saying, do whatever you can. Do the best you can. And you have no idea, those 3 years might have been difficult. But the fact that I had this power to tell him, go and do whatever you can. Let's see who wins.
That's amazing.
That's actually that was the most. It was amazing. It just, the fact that I could tell him that.
Yeah. Because you're supported here because it's a different world, because
I was a British citizen, and I knew that I could actually articulate all the reasons why that I am here, why the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing, why I've left. I mean, I said to him, you go and do whatever you want to do. Whatever you do actually is going to make my case. I mean, I didn't need a case, but whatever you do is going to make my case stronger for the fact that I actually left Iran and came here and sought asylum.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I guess we better get it back on track a little bit. We've gone off, haven't we, onto a different tangent, which is so interesting, and I could talk to you for hours around that, because, well, we did start by saying we wouldn't go sort of political, but this is the problem, isn't it? It does get political, these types of conversations, and it does divide people. And I think it divides people because we don't have the knowledge. If you are prepared to gather your knowledge from the Daily Mail or from, other news outlets, and without making your own inquiries, you're going to believe what they tell you, and they make it sound like it's terrible, don't they? That we are overrun with asylum seekers who aren't really asylum seekers, who are here for whatever, just to get benefits. They're either just to get benefits.
It's difficult to actually. It's the generalizing it is difficult, and it's easy for people who don't want to spend any time to understand it.
That's important too, spending the time. Some people want to learn, and others just want to be told what they're told.
I mean, why should it be my problem? I mean, that's the reaction. Why should it be? In the post that I put in on LinkedIn about it, that's what I said. And to be truthful, a lot of time I've thought about it myself. Why should? And not in the sense, not in the same way as a person who would, or a person who really wasn't interested ask this question. I ask this question because I think nobody should escape their country because they want to be a mother. Nobody should do that. Nobody should lose the right to look after their children, especially if they are the most capable person. I mean, in my own case, in the life that I lived it with my dad even didn't choose to look after us. He was forced to look after us because my mom didn't want to take a responsibility because she was confined by her family who didn't want her to take that responsibility, because then she couldn't get married again and she would have difficulties with remarrying. And it's such an interesting network of, mess. Is exactly. It's just, it's such an interesting network going on behind this story. But I really wanted to, between the two of us, between my husband and I knew that I am the capable one. And plus, the other thing was, I could not live without my son. I would die. I would die. I could not imagine not being with him. I could not imagine. I literally would die in despair,
Yeah, I do. I feel sorry for my son every day because I feel exactly the same.
Yeah.
No, I do. Right.
Anyway, go back to education.
Let's go back to education. Oh gosh, honestly. So, how did you decide to do a bachelor's degree at Bolton?
Okay. So somehow I ended up, throughout this journey, I ended up in Bolton. And I did, between 2003 and 4, I was studying English at college, but then I did a IELTS course because, I came to the point that none of the English courses was, and I'm thinking, what am I doing the English course for? So anyway, I did the IELTS course, and in the first exam, I had a 6.5 mark for my IELTS examination. And then I decided to go to university, but it actually goes a little bit backward. So I was already an architectural technologist. I'd worked for years in Iran in different companies. I had a lot of computer skills. Then in the first period of migration, shortly after I had my son, I migrated to UK, to Turkey, and I lived in Turkey and I worked in Turkey as an architect, actually. I did a lot of design work, worked with 2 really interesting companies, very briefly with one more as well, interior designers. So I was actually a qualified person to work, but when I tried applying for jobs, I couldn't actually get a job. But I didn't, I may have not had enough knowledge about the recruitment system as well either. But whatever it was, so in 2002, my first attempt to go to university was when I was an asylum seeker still. So I went to university and said to people that I am an asylum seeker. Can I come to university and study? And they said, well, you can come and do a HNC course. You have to pay for it, but we can put you on a HNC course, and you can pay for it in manageable amount. Still, it would be far beyond my budget to be able to do it with the money that I was receiving from government. It was impossible to do it. But they let me sit in 3 classes, or I sat in 3 classes before I actually commit to it. So, and I realized that I only understand about 25% of what I'm hearing. Especially once somebody started asking a question, I thought I completely got lost. And at the time, I made a friend straight away. She was this girl with this wacky pink hair and loads of tattoos and piercing and all of that. But she was such a wonderful girl. And she would explain this to me. She was a secretary in a construction company, and she decided to do a degree. You'd be surprised. She is a professor now. She has a PhD. She's a very well published academic.
Amazing.
And a wonderful friend. So I attended 3 classes, and I felt so embarrassed that I had to ask her every time that, so what does that mean? What does that mean? And she would patiently explain everything. But after the 3rd class, I went and spoke to the course leader, and I said, yes, my English probably is sufficient to articulate what I want to say, but it's not necessarily enough to understand all the technical terms that is used in construction industry, even though I am in my background is in, but I don't understand the English terms. I don't have that vocabulary to kind of understand it. And once somebody with a different local accent starts asking questions, I'm completely lost. I can't actually understand what it is. So I might be better to go and study more English. So I went and studied more English, including doing the IELTS. So finished in 2004. One thing that is really interesting, and I'm so grateful to Bolton and my lecturers who are all retired or left now, is how considerate they were. They were so amazing. I'm going to show you this book, which is actually right beside on my shelf. So one of my lecturers, the course leader, gave me this book. This is not that book. I actually returned that book, but I bought one for myself years later. He gave me this book, and he said, take this and read it. I mean, look at it. There are all the terms that you need to learn are in there. So, and I hope you come back, if nothing else, at least to return my book. So, and I left. And I left and did my IELTS and went back in September 2004. I was walking in the corridor, and he spotted me when I was going for the induction day. And he looked at me and said, I know you. I said, yes, I am back. So I'm going to, instead of doing HNC, I'm actually registered to do the degree now. So, I did the degree. And I returned his book. I bought him a book as a present as well. So, but do you know, it had a massive impact. The fact that he actually gave me that book, it was like putting something between the door, making sure that the door is open, and I will go back. And I went back, and it's interesting. I think you probably have experienced something similar. The fact that English wasn't my first language. In fact, for the first 4 years of my life here, my self-talks are in Turkish, not in my first language, in my second language. And I still talk in Turkish to myself a lot of time.
That's interesting. Not Farsi.
I hardly speak in Farsi to myself. The only thing that I noticed that I do in Farsi is, and I randomly noticed that I swim a lot, and I count my lanes in Persian.
Wow.
But I would speak. I mean, it has changed. I mean, I can't say that I always speak to myself in Turkish, but it could be a combination of Turkish English. Yeah. So I was so worried that whether or not I can do it, whether or not I can. I was one of the older students in the class. I was 34 when I started. I told you there was a gentleman who was about 60 something in our class. But it's different for people who English is first language. So I was on that front. I was a little bit nervous whether or not I can do it, whether or not I can write good enough. And the amount of writing that we have, it is architectural technology, but it's not just about drawing. There is a lot of research and writing going on in the background. So I was worried about that part as well. But it's interesting that I think I was so nervous that can I do it or not? I ended up with a straight A in the first year.
Oh, wow.
and I ended up with a first class degree, and I was the top of the faculty, and I think I was nominated for 3 awards by university, and I was nominated for 2 awards by professional bodies as well. So
That's fantastic. What do you think it is within you to be able to do that?
I think some of it is in your brain. I think some of these the person who I am today has really deep roots, the person that I have known myself to be from very, very, very long time, from childhood. Inquisitive, analytical, critical thinking. I don't know where they come from. Is that a genetic thing? Is that is that the way that you were brought up? We're 2 sisters, and we're 2 sisters completely different.
It's your level of resilience, though, isn't it? Everything that you've been through, and then you're fighting for whilst you're here, but yet, English isn't even your second language; it's your third language, and you've still been able to achieve a first class honours degree. I just think that's amazing.
It's I think it's part of it is everything that you live is. But I really wanted to have a degree. I wanted to be able to, and I was learning. I was so enjoying the learning. I still do. I mean, one of the reasons also I became an academic was that I thought I'm going to be a student for life. As an academic, this is, you're not registered as a student, but you're practically a student for life, because you're continuously learning. You have no choice but learning if you are going to teach. It's impossible not to learn if you are teaching. So, and I had my son, of course. I had my son, and I wanted to finish whatever I start, and I wanted to show him. I wanted to be that example. There's so many different reasons that you started, and you want. I think that's part of me, to be truthful as well. I just want to try to do the best I can, to not to fail.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing to have, I guess. And is that where your education ends, or is there more to come?
No, I then when I finished university, I was by my lecturers, I was recommended to go and work for a company. They were looking for a research officer for a term time. So I went and did about 3 months work with them, 4 months work with them, and then worked in industry in Manchester for an architect. But then economic crisis happened, and in 2008 I lost my job. I tried finding another job, and it didn't happen. So I decided to go and do a different qualification to broaden my skills. And between 2 different courses, one was architecture and urbanism in Manchester University, and plan and sustainable environment. I decided to go and do the plan and sustainable environment at Salford. So I did that, and then I asked, when I finished my master's, I asked my friend, if I ever decided to do a PhD, please tie me and beat me as much as you can to remind me that is not a good idea. So during that time, after I finished my master's, I was searching for a research job and some other jobs to actually do something. And I ended up being approached again by my former lecturers and colleagues at Bolton to say, we really desperately need somebody to come and teach CAD. And then starting with 4.5 hours in 2010, I was teaching 22 hours per week. And eventually I ended up applying for a job. And then I did my teaching qualification at Bolton too. So I've done that at Bolton between 2011 and 12. Yeah.
So we don't see you coming back to a PhD?
Oh,
she's not saying no.
Do you know, I it's funny enough, I actually registered my name to do a PhD, but at the minute I don't have the motivation to actually go back to it. Maybe one day, but I want, like yourself, because I did in fact, do you remember the girl that I mentioned at the beginning when I met you? So we both ended up with a first class degree. Fred was a wonderful, talented, intelligent girl. She studied construction management, and I studied architectural technology. And when we finished, we were offered both, because we finished with first class. We could do a free PhD at university, both of us at the time. Fred took that opportunity and did her PhD. So she didn't do a master's, she did it straight away. She went to a PhD. But I didn't. My life dynamics was slightly different. I still had a child, and I had different problems to really solve. And beside that, I was thinking PhD is a really massive thing, and I wanted to know what really is the next thing that I wanted to study. So
it's really important to really be committed and to really care about it. I know that's one message I'm getting from everybody I'm speaking to is, you've got to be really, really invested in it. And if you're just not, it doesn't mean it's not achievable. It's just not the right time.
It's not. I mean, you need to. I mean, it sounds very strange, probably, but when I did my master's in environmental sustainability, I by the time that I finished, I thought, what I really need to do next is some sort of a study in economics. And maybe one day when I am motivated enough and can afford it, then I will do a PhD in economics. Yes.
Right. Well, I think we've gone on for quite a long time now. I'm really sorry to have taken so much of your time.
That's okay.
I could just sit and talk to you for hours about lots of different things that you've said and go off.
You can always come back to me, Lyndsey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
you can always come back to me. We have episode 2.
But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's been really, really interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having us. I'll see you soon.